1922, after 5 years of searching, Howard Carter and his patron Lord Carnarvon finally discovered the last resting place of Tutankhamun.
1922, after 5 years of searching, Howard Carter and his patron Lord Carnarvon finally discovered the last resting place of Tutankhamun, the most recognized face on Earth. For 100 years, we believed King Tut's golden mask was made for the boy who wore it. We were wrong. Scientists recently used quantum imaging to scan beneath its gleaming surface. What they found is shaking Egyptology to its foundations, hidden alterations, microscopic tool marks, and a ghost-like signature erased from history before the tomb was sealed. This is the unraveling of a 3,000-year-old cover-up. The mask the whole world loves has been hiding a secret that changes everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt. A king's journey to the afterlife. Picture a journey with no return, no reservation, no road map, just you, a procession of gods and an eternity stretching out ahead of you. That is exactly how the ancient Egyptians understood death. Not as an ending, but as a relocation to another realm. And like any serious move, you did not go empty-handed. For more than 3,000 years, Egyptian pharaohs were buried with everything they might conceivably need in the world beyond. Food, wine, furniture, clothing, jewelry, household goods. This was not simply tradition. It was preparation for survival. Consider Pharaoh Tutankhamun's great-grandfather, Thutmose IV. When archaeologists opened his tomb, they found beds, chariots, and dozens of wine jars, each one labeled like a prized vintage. Or look at Susanna's eye, the silver pharaoh, buried at Tanis with breathtaking jewelry, a solid silver coffin, and even a set of board games to occupy eternity. But none of them, not one, approached the afterlife with the thoroughness of a teenage king who died around 1323 BC. His name was Tutankhamun, and his tomb, discovered in 1922, contained more than 5,000 objects packed into 4 cramped rooms. We are not talking about a few scattered trinkets. We are talking about weapons and armor, including a dagger forged from meteoric iron. Its blade literally not from this earth, fitted to a golden handle, 130 walking sticks because the king had a bad foot. Boomerangs, bow and arrow sets, a golden throne, beds, chairs, including one made for a small child, personal clothing, 100 sandals, 28 gloves, 25 head coverings, 4 pairs of socks, and 145 linen loincloths. Because even pharaohs need clean underwear in the afterlife. But among all that staggering wealth, one object sat directly on the mummified king's face. A solid gold portrait mask. The most famous artifact ever lifted from Egyptian soil. Beautiful, flawless, and according to the science now emerging, almost certainly not made for him at all. The hunt that missed the mark. For nearly a decade before Tutankhamun's tomb made history, the man who should have found it completely missed it. Theodore Davis was an American lawyer who became a millionaire and then turned his attention to Egypt. Between 1905 and 1914, he held the official concession to dig in the Valley of the Kings. Davis did not swing the pickaxe himself. He hired a young British archaeologist named Edward Urton to do that, but he called the shots. Together, they moved enormous quantities of stone and sand, and they did find something. In 1907, while clearing a debris pile, they came across a small pit, which they called a pit deposit. Inside were broken pottery, linen scraps, and objects inscribed with a barely known pharaoh's name, Tutankhamun. Davis barely registered it. The boy king was a footnote at that point, a minor ruler nobody gave much thought to. Then in 1914, uncovered something else, a tiny damaged space later catalogued as KV-54. It was barely a hole in the ground. Inside were more bandages, some clay ceilings, and what looked like leftover food jars. Davis surveyed the meager find and declared with complete confidence that he had located Tutankhamun's real tomb. He wrote in his publication, "I fear the Valley of the Kings is now exhausted." He was wrong. Dead wrong. What Davis had found was a ritual cache. The leftover materials from Tut's funeral, hastily cleared away after the priests completed the mummification. The real tomb, sealed and untouched, lay just a few meters away under centuries of flood debris. Davis had literally walked past the greatest archaeological discovery in history and called it a day. Frustrated and convinced the valley had nothing left to offer, he surrendered his concession in 1914. Enter George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carvin, a wealthy aristocrat with a genuine passion for Egyptology. Connerin had been forced into warm climates by a motor accident that left his lungs damaged. He acquired the digging rights to the valley and hired a man named Howard Carter to lead the search. Carter was meticulous, obsessive, and famously stubborn. He studied every available map, every surviving fragment, every recorded clue. He was certain Davis had overlooked something significant. Then the world erupted. World War I shut down major excavations. Soldiers replaced archaeologists and the valley went silent. Carter took odd jobs, drawing tomb paintings, working as a translator for the British military, but never stopped thinking about the mysterious pharaoh with the unusual name. When the war ended, Caravan gave Carter one final season. If they found nothing, funding would end permanently. They started digging in 1922. Carter's team trenched through rubble and found nothing. Lord Carnarvon, watching his fortune vanish into Egyptian sand, sent a blunt letter. He would not continue financing the search past this winter. Carter begged for a few more months. He had one stubborn hunch: that an overlooked patch of ground near the entrance to the tomb of Ramesses VI, part of Davis's old dig site, had never been properly cleared. Connerin reluctantly agreed. On November 1, 1922, Carter's team began clearing that patch. 3 days later, 72 hours into what was supposed to be the final attempt, one of Carter's water boys struck something hard beneath the sand with his pick. A flat surface, cut stone. They swept away the dust and found a step, then another, then an entire staircase carved into the bedrock. At the bottom, a plaster doorway still sealed after 3,345 years.
In 1907,
stamped into the plaster clear as the moment it was made,
they came across
was a name that would become the most famous in the history of archaeology. Tutankhamun, the glint of gold. On November 26, 1922, Howard Carter made a small hole through the plaster doorway. He inserted a candle and looked through. What he saw defied every expectation. For decades, archaeologists had accepted that the Valley of the Kings had been picked clean. Almost every tomb had been looted in antiquity, sometimes repeatedly. Robbers stripped pharaohs of their gold, smashed furniture into portable pieces, and left only broken remnants behind. So when Carter and Carnarvon first stood before that sealed doorway, they prepared themselves for disappointment. The plaster showed clear evidence of having been broken and resealed, not once, but twice. Carter later wrote that he expected a dry, rubble-filled hole. Instead, the candlelight revealed chaos. Glorious chaos. In his field notes, Carter described strange animals, statues, and gold everywhere, the glint of gold. That first chamber, which he named the antechamber, held over 600 objects in magnificent disorder. Ancient looters had broken in twice, snatched whatever jewelry and portable valuables they could find, and fled when guards descended on them. The guards chased the robbers off and resealed the door, but nobody had bothered to reorganize the chaos they left behind. Carter's team found dismantled chariots, overturned chests, a golden throne, gilded couches carved into the shapes of lions and mythical cows. It took more than 2 months just to photograph, catalog, and safely remove the contents of that one room. Beyond it, a second sealed doorway led to the burial chamber. When Carter finally entered, he stood in a space no living human witnessed in 3,245 years. A massive golden shrine, essentially a portable room constructed from wood and overlaid with gold, filled nearly the entire chamber. Inside that shrine was another, then another, then another. 4 shrines nested like Russian dolls, each surface covered in protective magical spells. Within the innermost shrine sat a stone sarcophagus weighing over a ton. When Carter's team lifted its lid, they found 3 golden coffins, each nested inside the next. The outermost was gilded wood. The middle was gilded as well. The innermost was solid gold. More than 110 kilograms of it, shaped precisely in the form of a mummified king, arms crossed, holding the royal regalia. And inside that gold coffin lay the mummy of Tutankhamun himself, covered in jewelry, amulets, and a breathtaking golden portrait mask placed directly on the boy's rapt face. That mask is what the world would come to know as the face of ancient Egypt. It stands 54 centimeters tall, weighs over 10 kilograms of solid gold, and is inlaid with lapis lazuli, turquoise, and colored glass. For the ancient Egyptians, gold was the flesh of the gods. The mask was not art. It was sacred technology designed to help the king's soul recognize its own body as it journeyed through the darkness of the afterlife. Carter noticed a small oddity. Even then, the gold on the face had a slightly different color than the gold of the headdress. He noted it and moved on. He had 5,000 objects to catalog. He did not know that small inconsistency was a crack in a cover-up that would take nearly a century and a revolutionary technology to finally expose. Pierced secrets. For 100 years, the world gazed at Tutankhamun's golden mask and saw perfection. But Egyptologists saw something else. A puzzle that refused to resolve. The first clue was visible to anyone who looked closely. Pierced ears. In ancient Egypt, earrings were not merely decorative. They carried deep cultural meaning, and that meaning was governed by clear conventions. Tomb paintings, surviving statues, and the jewelry record all point to the same rule. Adult male pharaohs were never depicted with pierced ears. Never. The imagery of a ruling king demanded masculine authority. Unpierced, unadorned. Piercings belonged to women and to children. So why did the most famous pharaoh's mask carry 2 perfectly drilled holes in its earlobes? For decades, Egyptologists offered explanations. Perhaps it was a childhood holdover. Perhaps artistic license. Then in 2022, exactly a century after Carter's discovery, a team from the University of York published a radical reassessment. Their conclusion: the mask was originally made for someone else entirely. The pierced ears, they argued, were the long overlooked feature that changes everything. Tutankhamun ascended the throne at around age 9 and died at approximately 19 or 20. By the time of his death, researcher Joanne Fletcher argues he would have been depicted as an adult male without ear piercings. The presence of those holes suggests the mask was originally prepared for either a high-status woman or a young child. The most compelling candidate, Queen Nefertiti, Tutankhamun's stepmother and one of the most powerful women in Egyptian history. Nefertiti famously vanished from the historical record late in her husband's reign. Many historians believe she assumed the throne under the name Nefertiti, ruling as a female pharaoh in her own right. If her burial mask had already been crafted, complete with the pierced ears appropriate for a female ruler, it could have been hastily repurposed when the boy king died unexpectedly, leaving the royal workshop scrambling against the clock. But the ears were not the only clue. The mask's gold told a more technical story. Careful examination revealed that the gold covering Tut's face carries a slightly different hue than the gold of the headdress. One is warmer with a reddish cast. The other is cooler and more yellow. This is not a trick of lighting. It suggests 2 different batches of metal, 2 separate manufacturing events. The face, the researchers argue, was effectively grafted onto a pre-existing mask originally shaped for a different face, and the ears, for whatever reason, were left untouched. Then there was the rushed burial itself. Tutankhamun died suddenly, likely from a combination of a broken leg and a severe malarial infection. Egyptian tradition demanded burial exactly 70 days after death. No exceptions. That is an impossibly compressed timeline to carve a tomb, assemble thousands of grave goods, and craft a solid gold portrait mask from scratch. The tomb's wall paintings still bear blotches of uncured paint. Workers sealed the chambers before the plaster had properly dried. The tomb itself is unusually small, almost certainly borrowed or repurposed from another purpose. Even the stone sarcophagus shows chipped corners, as if workers had to force it into a space not quite large enough to receive it. Put it all together: pierced ears, mismatched gold, a tomb assembled in controlled panic. The mask everyone assumed was made for the boy king begins to look like something very different. A recycled masterpiece adapted in desperate haste. For decades, this remained theory. Egyptologists debated without resolution. Then science stepped in. Not just any science, a technology capable of reading the atomic memory of metal itself. The X-ray verdict. In 2015, a team of conservators and scientists put the Nefertiti theory to a rigorous test. Their conclusion: case closed. The mask belonged to Tutankhamun. No question. The investigation, led by German conservator Christian Ekman, used a technique called X-ray fluorescence or XRF. The method fires X-rays at an object, causing its atoms to emit a fluorescent signal that reveals exactly which chemical elements are present. It can read the composition of gold, detect soldered seams, and identify hidden alterations at a level invisible to the naked eye. Ekman's team scanned every millimeter of the mask. Their published findings in 2015 directly contradicted the repurposing theory on multiple fronts. First, the gold composition. The face and neck of the mask were made from 18.4 karat gold, while the rest of the headdress registered at 22.5 karat. At first glance, that sounds like evidence of two separate origins, but Ekman explained it differently. Ancient Egyptian goldsmiths routinely used different alloys for different components of a single object depending on the required hardness and the desired color. The face required a softer, more workable gold for the intricate surface detail. The headdress needed harder gold for structural integrity. This was not evidence of a swap. It was evidence of sophisticated and deliberate engineering. Second, the construction method. The mask was not cast as one solid piece. It was hammered from two layers of high-carat gold, approximately 23 karat, ranging from 1½ to 3 millimeters in thickness, then joined through a combination of heating, soldering, and hammering. This was standard technique for large gold objects in the New Kingdom period. The XRF scan found no trace of the face having been replaced, no residual solder from a prior attachment point, no hammered seams from where a previous face had been cut away and another inserted. Third, the pierced ears. Other mummified pharaohs, including adult males, were occasionally depicted with pierced ears in funerary equipment. The practice was not exclusively female or childish, the team argued, so the holes in the mask's earlobes were not conclusive evidence of female ownership. Fourth, the delicate inlays. The mask's eyebrows and eyelids are set with lapis lazuli. The eyes are quartz with obsidian pupils. The blue stripes of the royal headdress are colored glass paste. If a new face had been soldered onto an existing structure, the heat required, exceeding 800 degrees Celsius, would have cracked or destroyed these fragile inlays entirely. They were intact with no sign of thermal damage. Finally, the beard. The iconic long narrow beard of gold and lapis-colored glass is attached via a tube system. When Ekman's team removed the epoxy that had been disastrously smeared across the chin during a botched 2014 cleaning incident, when a museum worker accidentally knocked the beard off and staff hurriedly glued it back on, they reattached it properly using beeswax, music, the same adhesive the ancient Egyptians would have used. The XRF verdict was unambiguous. The mask had been made as a single intentional creation for Tutankhamun. The different gold colors, the construction seams, even the pierced ears, all explained by normal Egyptian craftsmanship. The Nefertiti theory was officially dead. For nearly a decade, this became the consensus. Textbooks were updated. Documentaries aired the corrected story. The mystery seemed solved. But a small group of physicists was not convinced. They argued that X-rays have fundamental limits. They can reveal what is present in metal, but they cannot show the history of that metal, whether it was reheated, hammered flat, or reshaped after its original cooling. To see that, you would need a technology that reads not just the surface composition, but the quantum memory of atoms themselves. Welded by ghosts. Hold the mask at arm's length, and it looks like a seamless sheet of gold shaped in a single burst of creative effort by a single pair of hands. Science reveals something more complex. Advanced scanning has shown that the mask is assembled from multiple separate pieces of gold joined together with a precision that still challenges metallurgists to explain. The joints are invisible to the naked eye, sometimes no thicker than a few atoms. Researchers have described the technique as micro-soldering, an extraordinarily fine method of fusing gold surfaces without leaving a visible trace. Think about what that demands. The craftsman who built this mask had no magnifying glass, no electric torch, no laser. Yet they achieved a level of joint precision that would challenge a modern jewelry workshop equipped with every contemporary tool available. The mask's face, headdress, beard, and backplate were each shaped separately, then fused using heat and pressure, applied with a control so exact that the boundaries between individual pieces simply ceased to be visible. Some researchers have proposed a technique called diffusion bonding, pressing two pieces of gold together under extreme heat until their molecular structures merge and the material forgets. It was ever two separate objects. It becomes one. This discovery cuts both ways in the Nefertiti debate. On one hand, the presence of invisible seams proves the mask was extensively constructed, not cast as a monolith. That means alteration was technically possible. A face could be removed and replaced if the craftsman was skilled enough. On the other hand, it demonstrates that the people who built this object were masters of a lost art. If they could hide joins that perfectly, Could they also conceal evidence of modification? Could the XRF scans have missed a grafted face simply because the graft was executed that precisely?
At first glance,
the
that
quantum
sounds like
imaging team
evidence of
asked
two separate
exactly that
origins.
question.
The
A spell
gold has a
written in
memory.
silence.
Under
Everyone knows
extreme
the front of
magnification,
Tutankhamun's mask.
someone
That
erased
serene,
the
youthful
original
face,
owner's
the golden
name
skin,
before
the lapis
carving
lazuli eyebrows,
Tutankhamun's in
the
its
striped
place.
Nemus headdress.
For the
It has become the
priests
face of
scrambling
ancient
to meet
Egypt
the
itself.
70-day burial
Most people have
deadline,
never seen the back.
recycling an
And that is
existing
where the
mask
real mystery
made
was
perfect
hiding.
sense.
When researchers turned the
Erased
mask
the
around
previous
and
owner's
applied
name,
quantum imaging to its
filled
reverse
the
surface,
pierced ears,
they found something
replaced
extraordinary.
the face,
10 vertical
recarved
and
the
2 horizontal
hieroglyphs,
lines of
sealed the
hieroglyphs
tomb,
carved directly
and
into the
hope
gold.
no one ever
This
looks
is not
closely enough to
decoration.
notice.
It is a
For
protective
more
spell.
than 3,000
Specifically,
years,
Chapter
no one
151
did.
of the Egyptian Book of the
World
Dead,
War I
and it may
shut
hold the
down
key
major
to understanding who the
excavations.
mask was truly
Soldiers
created for.
replaced
In
archaeologists,
ancient Egyptian belief,
and the
death
valley
was not an
went
ending,
silent.
but a dangerous
Carter
passage.
took odd
The
jobs,
underworld was filled with
drawing
demons,
tomb
gates
paintings,
of fire, and
working
the
as a
terrifying
translator
judgment
for
of the
the
gods.
British military.
A pharaoh could
but
not
never
navigate
stopped
this
thinking
alone.
about the
He
mysterious
needed a
pharaoh
roadmap.
with the
He
unusual
needed
name.
passwords.
When the
He
war
needed
ended,
magic woven into the
Carnarvon
very
gave
objects
Carter
surrounding
one
his
final
body.
season.
That is exactly
If
what
they
spell
found nothing,
151
funding
provided.
would end.
The inscription on the back of
Permanently.
Tut's mask was not
If
a
a new
prayer.
face had been
It was a
soldered
protective
onto an
formula
existing
designed to
structure,
guard the king's
the
face
heat
and limbs
required,
as his soul.
exceeding
The
800
BA
degrees
moved
Celsius,
through the darkness.
would have
Each
cracked or
element of the
destroyed
mask
these
was
fragile
magically linked
inlays
to a specific
entirely.
deity. The right
Finally,
eye became the
the
night
beard,
bark of the
the
sun god
iconic
Ra.
long, narrow
The left
beard
eye
of gold
became the
and
day bark.
lapis-colored glass.
The forehead was guarded
When
by
Ekman's
Anubis,
team removed
god
the
of
epoxy
mummification.
that had been
The nape of the neck
disastrously
belonged
smeared
to
across
Horus.
the chin,
The
and
sky
staff
god.
hurriedly
The
glued
hair
it
was
back
claimed
on.
by Ta Soker,
They
the
reattached
fusion
it
of
properly
creation
using
and death.
beeswax,
The mask
same
was not
adhesive
merely
the
a
ancient
portrait.
Egyptians would have
It was a
used.
divine merger.
Specifically, Chapter
Tutankhamun's face
151
transformed into a
of the
living
Egyptian
pantheon.
Book of the Dead.
Each movement of his
And it
head
may hold
invoking
the
a
key
different god's
to
protection.
understanding who the
But here
mask
is
was
what most
truly
Egyptologists
created
do
for.
not say out loud.
In ancient Egyptian
Spell
belief,
151
death
is
was
roughly
not an
500
ending,
years
but a
older than
dangerous
Tutankhamun.
passage.
It first
The
appeared on
underworld was
masks from the
filled
Middle
with
Kingdom
demons,
generations
gates of
before this
fire,
king was born.
and the terrifying
text was a
judgment
standard
of the
protective
gods.
formula copied
A
and
pharaoh could
recopied
not
by
navigate
priests
this
for half a
alone.
millennium.
He needed
Finding
a
it on
roadmap.
Tu's mask
He
is
needed
not unusual.
passwords.
What
He
is
needed
unusual
magic
is what
woven
the
into
spell
very
does not
objects
say.
surrounding his
Nowhere
body.
on the back of the mask
That is
does
exactly what
Tutankhamun's
spell
name appear in direct
151
connection with the
provided.
divine
The
associations
inscription
listed.
on the back of
The
Tut's
spell is
mask
generic,
was not a prayer.
template.
It
It
was a
references the
protective
Osiris,
formula
the
designed to
standard
guard
title
the
for
king's
any
face
deceased king,
and
but
limbs
leaves room
as
for a
his
specific
soul.
name to be inserted.
Solder lines
And when
along the
conservators
neck showed
examined
the
those
beard was a
hieroglyphs
separate
closely,
piece
they noticed
attached
something the
as what
XRF
appeared to be an
scans had missed.
afterthought.
The gold
And the
surface surrounding
solder
the inscription
used
carries
was
signs of repeated
compositionally
tool
different
contact,
from
as
the
if the original
metalwork
carving
across the
had been
rest of
scraped
the
flat
mask.
and then recut.
Not part of
The
the
gold
original
has a
design,
memory.
but added
Under
later,
extreme
under
magnification,
time pressure.
the microscopic scratches
This
from that
supports
earlier
the
work remain
repurposing
visible
theory
in the metal.
directly.
Someone erased
If
the
you are
original
adapting
owner's
a
name
mask
before carving
originally made for a
Tutankhamun's in
female
its place.
pharaoh,
The
who
spell
would not have
survived
worn a
because
false
spells are
ceremonial
reusable.
beard,
But the
and you
identity
need to make
embedded
it
in that
suitable for a
spell
male
was changed.
king. You
For the
add
priests
beard
scrambling to meet
quickly,
the 70-day burial deadline,
imperfectly,
recycling an
and had
existing
already
mask
begun
made
to
perfect
fail
sense.
before the tomb
Take
was
a mask
sealed.
already inscribed with
Carter
the powerful
documented
protection
the
of
detail,
spell
but offered
151.
no explanation.
Erase the previous
Then,
owner's
in
name.
2014,
Fill the pierced
disaster
ears.
struck.
Replace the face.
During a
recarve the
routine
hieroglyphs.
cleaning at the
seal
Egyptian
the tomb,
Museum
and
in
hope
Cairo,
no one ever looks
a
closely
museum
enough to
worker
notice.
accidentally
For
knocked
more
the
than
beard
3,000
off
years,
entirely.
no one did.
In the confusion
the scars
that followed,
of a rush job.
staff used
For
commercial
all its breathtaking
epoxy
beauty,
to reattach
King
it,
Tut's mask is
smearing
not without
adhesive
scars.
across the golden
Some are
chin
ancient,
in a
some are
repair
modern.
that made international
Together they narrate a
headlines
story
for
of
all
panic,
the wrong
improvisation,
reasons.
and a cover-up
When
that
expert
almost survived
conservators
intact.
later corrected the
Start
damage,
at the chin.
they made a
That
discovery
long, narrow
that
beard
nobody
made
had
of gold
expected.
and lapis-colored glass
The
has been
original
a problem
ancient
for over
joint between the
3,000
beard
years.
and the mask
When Howard
had
Carter
been
first lifted the
extremely
mask from the mummy's face
and
in
you hope the
1922,
solder line
he
goes
noticed that the
unnoticed.
beard was already loose.
Now look
It
at
was
the
not
top
firmly
of the
secured.
mask.
It
There
sat
is a
slightly
small
askew,
vulture
as if it
figure
had been reattached in
part
haste
of the
and had
royal
already
headdress,
begun to fail before the tomb
representing
was
the
sealed.
goddess
Carter
Nekhbet.
documented the
Its
detail,
eyes are
but
missing.
offered no explanation.
Not lost in
Then,
modern times.
in 2014,
Microscopic
disaster
scratches
struck.
around the empty
During a
sockets
routine cleaning
show
at the
the
Egyptian
inlays
Museum
were
in Cairo,
pried out in
a museum
antiquity,
worker accidentally
almost
knocked the
certainly
beard
by the
off
same
entirely.
looters
In the
who broke
confusion that
into the
followed,
tomb twice
staff used
during the
commercial
ancient
epoxy to
period.
reattach it,
The guards
smearing
who drove
adhesive
them
across the golden
never
chin in a
replaced
repair
the
that made
missing
international
stones.
headlines for all
They
the wrong
simply
reasons.
resealed the door
When expert
and left
conservators
the
later
vulture
corrected the
blind.
damage, They made a discovery that nobody had expected. The original ancient joint between the beard and the mask had been extremely weak. Solder lines along the neck showed the beard was a separate piece attached as what appeared to be an afterthought, and the solder used was compositionally different from the metalwork across the rest of the mask, not part of the original design, but added later under time pressure. This supports the repurposing theory directly. If you are adapting a mask originally made for a female pharaoh who would not have worn a false ceremonial beard, and you need to make it suitable for a male king, you add the beard quickly and perfectly, and you hope the solder line goes unnoticed. Now look at the top of the mask. There is a small vulture figure, part of the royal headdress representing the goddess Nekhbet. Its eyes are missing, not lost in modern times. Microscopic scratches around the empty sockets show the inlays were pried out in antiquity, almost certainly by the same Lutters who broke into the tomb twice during the ancient period. The guards who drove them off never replaced the missing stones. They simply resealed the door and left the vulture blind. The mask that the world calls perfect has been carrying these wounds for 3 millennia. The rushed soldier, the missing eyes, the erased name on the back, the ears that should not be there. For over 3,000 years, the gold held its secrets until the science became sharp enough to finally listen to what the metal had been trying to say all along. And what it says is this: the face everyone has loved, the face that has represented an entire civilization, may have been placed on the wrong king. Share your thoughts in the comments, because this story is still being written.